asked me how I was able to interview Chris Barnes, and since I suppose the backstory is pretty neat, I'm happy to spew. It almost didn't happen, but it did, so here goes. Last May, I did a review for Killing for Revenge here on this channel. It was probably what you'd call a glowing review, because the album seriously is fantastic. But maybe a week, 2 weeks after its upload, one of the admins for the 6 Feet Under Facebook reposted it. Very cool thing to do. Not long after that, I found what looked to be the band's official Instagram account, and I friggin' followed it. Amazingly and mind-bogglingly, I got a follow back. That's insane, because who the hell am I? Then, as if that wasn't enough, I learned firsthand that the account was maintained by Barnes himself, because he messaged me saying, thanks for the review. Now, call me old school, but I still continue to be floored by the fact that social media has broken down the barriers between fans and artists. But that openness in no way, at least to me, lessens what I'd call the magnitude of the fact that you get to interact directly with legends of our day. You know, which is sort of anti the whole, hey man, they're just people too thing. I get that, but no. The Barnes, the Owens, the Tardys, Rutans, the Winos, the Kurt Winsteins of our day, they are friggin' legends, man, so I made damn sure to communicate with only the utmost respect. With that, we stayed in contact, and here and there, short dialogue pertaining to whatever would occasionally be exchanged. And let me just tell you something, man, with the absolute toilet bowl that was 2024, having that guy as a friend, as loosely as that can mean on social media, meant the goddamn world to me, man. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully express just how big that was. So okay, July 9th, over the heavy metal newswire, Nile and 6 Feet Under co-headlining Trek Through America. Hell yeah! And beautifully, one of the dates was pretty nearby in Virginia. Now at that point in July though, the thought of actually sitting down with Barnes hadn't entered my mind. It didn't, because with this tour being the first proper one in the States in over a decade, I just figured he'd want to concentrate fully on the road and nothing else. More time goes by, Killing for Revenge is still very much in regular rotation, different tracks start to have their own meaning relating to whatever's going on in life at that moment, just as lots of music can very often, and I start wondering about things like, who came up with that mean harmonized guitar part in Mass Casualty Murder Side? How did the main riff and When the Moon Goes Down in Blood come together? I was just starting to get really curious about a lot of the music on the album the more I listened. So by September, I thought about various names and connections I'd built relationships with in metal, and I was like, you know, I wonder if he'd indeed entertain the idea of spending a few minutes on camera if I reached out and gave him a list of references and stuff. I mean, the worst he can say is no, which is understandable, so I build up the confidence and I'm like, alright, I'm gonna ask him. So I open Instagram and I'm like, yo, Chris, would you possibly have any interest in maybe sitting down and doing a real brief face-to-face, just kind of talking about Killing for Revenge when you guys roll through Leesburg on the 16th? Now, I emphasized brief for two very important reasons. The first I'll say now, the second I'll get to in a minute. The first is because with imagining how hectic life on the road could be, my hallucination was that, no, there probably wouldn't be much time for him to spend with some dork before needing to ship out for the next show. But surprisingly, miraculously, he says, although he doesn't usually do stuff like that while on tour, it still could be a possibility, and let's just talk about it more as the Virginia date draws closer. So obviously, I'm psyched, needless to say. Majorly, first off, because I'm gonna get to see 6 Feet Under, but now there's a chance to get answers to all the album questions straight from the source. So I tell him, I'm like, alright, awesome. Look, if you want to check references and stuff, these are some of the people I've worked with. You probably already have all their numbers, but I'm happy to share everyone's info if necessary. And he's like, no worries, man, it's cool. Wow. But one major thing that probably helped on that front too was that I was already connected with his touring bassist, Jeff Golden, through my relationship with some of his friends in October Noir. Shout out Tom, Doug, Tyler, and Trey. And Jeff becomes a pivotal figure in this story, which he'll enter shortly. So alright, time's marching on, and I begin the process of religiously rehearsing all the questions in my head, in strict order, should this thing actually happen. And I mean, I thought about those questions constantly. I did because I didn't want to screw up, which happened, god damn it, but I'll get to that. Clock strikes 12 on January 1st, 2025 is officially here, and so too came the 7th, the first night of the tour. But let me back up a sec to January 2nd. This was the date I reached back to Chris just to kind of check in and see if the possibility of meeting up was still on the table. At that point, it was, and was starting to look like this thing may actually go down after all. He said, yes, we'll get it together, just message me the day before the show and I'll know more about the schedule. So alright, with excitement but equally anxiousness, I do just that. midday January 15th, I'm like, hey Chris, just wanted to check in and see if your schedule still aligns with meeting up for a few minutes after tomorrow's show. And nothing. Alright, I mean, hey, life in the tour bus, life on tour, period. You're up there growling away, doing meet and greets, this, that, and the other thing. I mean, I've never done it myself, but can only imagine there's a ton of stuff to tend to. Now, given that the silence was slightly out of character, at approximately 7:45, I reach out to Jeff Golden, and I'm like, hey, Jeff, long story short, I give him the lowdown and ask if it's possible to assist at all with either asking Chris directly or perhaps their tour manager, just anything. All the while, still no word from Barnes yet. At around 10:40 that night, however, Jeff gets back to me and says exactly what I would imagine could happen to anybody at the start of a big tour, and probably does happen often. Chris has been a little under the weather the last few days. I'll check with the tour manager to see if she knows anything about your plans, and I'll keep you updated. But otherwise, stuff has been awesome so far. And I agreed. From the videos I'd seen, they seriously looked like they were pounding it on stage. But 11:40 p.m., 12:40 a.m., 2, 3, 4, 5 a.m. I am constantly checking my phone like 50 times an hour, but no activity. At 5:30 a.m. the morning of the show, Jeff gets back to me and he's like, hey man, wasn't able to find anything out last night, and as a matter of fact, I started feeling like shit too, but everybody's rested up for tonight's performance. So at that point, I'm kind of like, alright, it's probably not going to go down, which is totally fine because I figured there was a strong chance of something getting in the way anyway, but I just hope all the guys in the band are cool. So in the remote chance I hear back from Barnes with the green light, I pack all my gear up and I head to the show. I mean, I was psyched as hell for the show alone, so all good. So I get there, I'm hanging out, waiting for Psychroptic to come on, not thinking much of anything, when all of a sudden, who comes up and says hello but Jeff Golden? And what a guy, man. Totally awesome dude. We're talking about music, his time in Crowbar, his other instrumental project, Blood of the Earth. He gives me a Blood of the Earth guitar pick and sticker and a 6 Feet Under pick, and like, just an all-around awesome dude. But even at that point, he wasn't able to give an update on Chris's status, which was fine. I mean, again, I kind of put to bed the likelihood that anything was gonna happen, because you hear somebody's sick, especially somebody that's given so much to heavy metal, and what, you're gonna be like, come on. No way! Funny side story, when Jeff and I were talking, there was this dude in front of us whose face I couldn't see. I still never saw it at any point. And when Jeff walked away, the dude kind of tapped him on the shoulder and they start talking. And I laugh, because I think the dude's just like some normie or something, you know, and he's gonna talk Jeff's ear off. But the convo looked to be pretty friendly. And I find out afterward that the guy was none other than John Gallagher from Dying Fetus. He was just there to see the show. So alright, Psychroptic starts, who I'd never bothered to listen to before, because I'm not really into tech. But they were phenomenal. They blew me away, just like Obscura did. It's weird how you can kind of not really be into a certain genre, but when you see a band live, all of a sudden, like, they're awesome. And yeah, Psychroptic were excellent. But as they're finishing up, all of a sudden my phone lights up, and it's Chris. Paraphrasing, hey man, sorry for the delay in response time. I've been pretty sick the last few days, and I don't know if I can give a very good interview right now. My immediate thought, and what I subsequently responded with, was, hey, totally fine. No problem at all. Just have a great show. I mean, I'm gonna try to ask a legend, like, oh, are you sure? No. I left it at that. But then I was thinking, like, you know, it'd be kind of cool to at least be able to thank him in person just for being so cool over the last year, and like, I don't know, maybe I can get a picture with him. So I message him back and I'm like, Chris, do you think there's any chance I could maybe swing by the bus real quick before you guys leave to get a picture? And he's like, sure, brother, give me about 20 minutes after we finish and then come by. Maybe we could still get that interview in. So again, the fact that I was gonna be able to meet him in person was huge in itself. And truthfully, like, I still kind of figured there was no way he was gonna want to talk for any length of time after rocking for an hour and a half, so I'd bring my gear just in case, but the simple meeting would be big enough. So Hammer Smash just about ends and I leave and go back to my car. I throw all this gear on my back and the tiny chance he wants to talk on camera and head out to the tour bus. Oh, and as for the show itself, you've probably already seen all the videos and stuff. They're destroying it out there, man. Barnes sounds absolutely grisly, and like, here's the thing about him on stage. There is a reason his name comes with such weight and reverence. It's like I met Mike Tyson a few years ago, and immediately, man, when that dude walked in the room, it was just glaringly apparent, like automatically understood why he's a legend. Some people just have that star power that when you see it, cements their accomplishments as being fully legitimate. And there's many greats, of course, when it comes to athletics. Lee Trevino, Payne Stewart, but the GOATs Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods in golf, the Shaq, LeBron, but is anybody really touching Michael Jordan or Tom Brady? It's like, you just know, names like that truly are the greatest of all time for a reason, and in brutal death metal as they call it, I think that belt belongs to Chris. Oh, and as for when this became clear in real life, for me it was when the band first came walking out on stage before the PA was on and you heard Barnes sort of like warming up. It was like, oh man, it was just this kind of like unearthly sort of iciness is the only way I can describe it, and like, oh, it was just that signature tone, one death metal octave of many that they can do. But okay, amazingly, I get to the bus and there he is waiting at the door and I'm like, oh shit. He lets me in, and let me just tell you, from the moment I walked in till the moment I left, it was pure spaghetti. I don't know if you know that 4chan meme about like being nervous, but yeah, that's what I mean. Before anything else, can I just tell you, Chris Barnes not only was one of the nicest musicians I'd ever met, but people in general. Holy hell, I could swear on 100 Bibles and make the most comprehensive of lie detector tests happy when I say I mean that. Completely, wholly, and truthfully. You know, you always hear the same thing when it comes to famous people. Oh, they're so down to earth. But from how I witnessed Chris treat his fellow band members, his crew, and me, that man is truly, I'll say it again, one of the nicest people I have ever met. And the other thing too, and this is based off a brief exchange I saw him have with one of their road managers, Chris seemed insanely dialed in and aware of and adherent to the schedule. Because in this conversation I witnessed, they were already talking about the logistics of things 2 days in advance. So you can be damn sure he wants to make sure there will be zero roadblocks that keep the band from getting on stage every night to deliver to the fans the best possible performance they paid to see. I mean, it's already plain to see based off the way he interacts with the crowd every night, but now, having gotten to catch a small glimpse behind the scenes, the fans are Chris's #1 priority when touring. Of that, there is zero question. The fans are #1 to him. But okay, so he tells me right off the bat, he's like, yeah man, go ahead, set your stuff up. And I'm like, are you sure? I mean, I completely understand if, and he's like, nah, we've been talking about doing this for months, so let's get it done. So let me tell you this, it's one thing to have an ideal situation all figured out in your mind, it's another thing to actually do it in real life. So simultaneous to me trying to act as normal as I can and not starstruck like I always am with famous people, I'm all scatterbrained, going through my backpack, pulling out tripods and cameras and microphones and stuff, mic cords, the square little like box things that go on the mics, all that. I mean, with the type of dialogue I was probably sharing in those moments, I cannot imagine he or anybody else would have thought I was anything but a goddamn loon. But despite that, Chris still spoke with the utmost of grace and patience too, because, now here's the other reason why I was big on trying to emphasize that this interview would be brief. If anyone out there knows some of the finer details about commercial grade digital cameras, you probably already know the following. But when I first bought my gear, I had no idea there was a difference anymore between digital cameras and video cameras. I mean, if you look at many of today's cameras, they practically all look the same, like digital and video. Hell, I didn't even know video cameras were still a thing anymore, but they are. And so, due to some kind of like confusing tax regulation in the EU and Asia, as a way to separate the functionality between digital cameras and video cameras, a strict limit exists in the firmware of digital cameras that, when in video mode, does not allow you to record past 13 or 30 minutes, depending on build. I had no idea that was a thing until the first time I tried to record something and one camera cut off at the 30-minute mark and the other two side cameras stopped at 13, which means that every time I record something, even right now, I gotta set an alarm to remind myself, like, hey, get up and stop the camera so it doesn't cut off, and start a new file. So with the most grating of embarrassment, I had to try and explain this tax bullshit to Chris as a reason why I may need to get up at one point and reset the cameras. But regardless of that, he was completely cool and understanding. Couldn't have been more understanding, and for that alone, I will forever and eternally be grateful. So ultimately, I press record, and it's actually happening. And of course, just as I was off camera, I'm nervous as hell, and despite my effort to try and have no errors occur, I still managed to screw up where, like, okay, yeah, here's a list of screw-ups. And you know how these happen? This was probably a very stupid part of my pre-game plan, but I came up with a bunch of things I'd surely not want to have happen, just like general misspeaks, and I think in doing so, that actually created the chance that I would misspeak. Great example, referring to the song Compulsive as compulsion. Yeah, there's item 1. Item 2, since I always seem to shorten the names of everything, like in my brain, the album's just called Killing instead of its full title, Killing for Revenge, or the band Agnostic Front, I just call them Agnostic. So of course when it came time to ask about one of my favorite songs on Killing, Mass Casualty Murdercide, all I could remember to refer to it as was Murdercide. But he saved the day, and through some quick editing, I made it look somewhat normal. And then finally, and this is where I suppose you always gotta be ready to call an audible, but early on he brought up how Jack wrote the majority of music on Killing and Nightmares of the Decomposed. But that didn't stop my robot brain from asking about the collaborative effort in individual songs afterward. And like, God only knows what other kind of freak show behavior I probably exhibited, but still, despite any of that, Chris only responded with pure class and nothing but. So our discussion ends and I'm packing up and just throwing shit into my backpacks as quickly as I can, and who comes walking onto the bus? Another legend, Jack Owen, man, just like right there in front of me. And it happened to be that this was right around the moment I was trying to figure out how to position my phone to like, you know, like do it like a timer pick with Chris. So that turned into me asking Jack if he could take it. Yeah, imagine how wild that was. Jack, would you mind taking a picture of Chris and I? Which only meant immediately afterward I asked Chris if he could then take one of Jack and I. So yeah, dude, that was that. So concluded an absolutely insane experience I will remember for the rest of my life. And that's God's honest truth, man. Like I said, I know that the concept of the superstar kind of has a different meaning today thanks to technology, and even if a larger segment of society is more familiar with a name like Taylor Swift or Travis Kelce, whatever, man, that ain't my society. And if given the chance to be on camera with Barnes or Swift, it's Barnes all day. No joke. So alright, mateys, there you go. I hope that story answers the question of like how I was lucky enough to do this. So if you did like this video, cool, maybe you can give it a thumbs up. Or if you just like hearing somebody bullshit about heavy metal, then Warpath, Maximum Violence, or torment your ass right into that subscribe button. And we'll see you next time on Concrete Spew, but until then, stay wild, my friends.